Most women fight for half. Some fight for the house, the cars, the savings account scraped together over years of compromise. But when Victoria Chen signed the divorce papers that gray October afternoon in downtown Seattle,
Can you believe
she asked
this?
for absolutely nothing.
It's incredible.
Except
You're
one
stunning.
thing, her daughter. Her husband Marcus laughed as she capped the pen. A short, dismissive sound that echoed in the glass-walled office 20 stories above Elliott Bay. He thought he'd won the lottery. He thought he was divorcing a code monkey who'd gotten lucky marrying up into ambition and vision. He had no idea he was divorcing the architect of his entire empire. Victoria sat across from him in his corner office at Blake Logistics headquarters, the city stretching wet and gray below them. Ferries cut white lines through the bay, oblivious to the quiet devastation happening in this room. The office, the view, this entire building perched on 4th Avenue, she had paid for it. Not with money inherited or gifted. With something more valuable, something irreplaceable, 10,000 hours of code written in darkness while the world slept. Marcus checked his Rolex. Not a Patek Philippe, just a Rolex. He wasn't that successful yet, though he pretended otherwise in investor meetings and TechCrunch interviews. He had dinner reservations at Canlis in 40 minutes. Sienna hated waiting, and Marcus had learned that keeping his new girlfriend happy meant staying on schedule. The prenuptial agreement lay between them on the mahogany desk, 12 pages of legal text that summarized 10 years of marriage into clauses and waivers. Marcus's attorney Arthur Chen, no relation to Victoria despite sharing the surname, sat in the leather chair by the window, watching rain streak the glass. He'd tried 3 times to convince Victoria to get her own lawyer. She'd declined each time. Marcus leaned forward, voice smooth, and practiced the same tone he used when calming nervous shareholders during quarterly calls. The voice that said, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Everything is under control. You understand what you're signing, Victoria? This is a full waiver of spousal support. You get the Honda Civic, the Queen Anne apartment, and shared custody of Emma. I keep the Mercer Island house, the Audi, the company stock, and Blake Logistics remains 100% mine. No alimony, no claims on intellectual property, no retroactive anything." Victoria looked at the document. Her eyes caught on one specific line buried in Section 7, subsection C. Petitioner acknowledges respondent's sole ownership and development of Blake Logistics' proprietary software systems. A lie. The foundational lie upon which Marcus had built his kingdom of glass. 7 years ago, Blake Logistics didn't exist. Marcus was a mid-level operations manager at Amazon, coming home every night to their cramped Fremont apartment, complaining endlessly about inefficient last-mile delivery systems. The algorithms were trash, he'd say. The routing made no sense. Someone should fix it. Someone should build something better. Victoria, then a senior software engineer at Microsoft working on Azure cloud infrastructure, would listen to his rants while nursing baby Emma at 2 in the morning. Colicky infants don't care about work schedules or sleep deprivation. One particularly brutal night, Emma screaming inconsolably at 3 a.m. Victoria had opened her laptop just to distract herself from the exhaustion. She'd started sketching routing algorithms in Python, playing with optimization theories she'd studied in grad school at the University of Washington. She built the core algorithm in 6 weeks of stolen hours. Nap times. Midnight sessions after Emma finally fell asleep. Weekend mornings while Marcus played golf with his Amazon colleagues, networking his way toward an exit strategy he hadn't yet defined. The code was elegant in its brutality. Route optimization using real-time traffic data scraped from city infrastructure. AP as weather patterns pulled from NOAA databases driver, fatigue metrics calculated through shift length analysis, and predictive maintenance schedules based on vehicle telemetry. She'd named it Pathfinder after the Mars rover, something that found the most efficient path through unknown terrain. She'd shown Marcus the prototype on a Sunday morning, proud and exhausted, hoping he'd see what she'd built, hoping he'd be impressed not just by the technology, but by her, by the wife he'd stopped really looking at sometime around month 4 of the pregnancy. Marcus had stared at the laptop screen, eyes widening, as he watched the algorithm recalculate delivery routes in real time, watched theoretical fuel costs drop by 43%, watched estimated delivery times improve by 37%. The numbers were staggering. The implications were worth millions. He'd kissed her forehead, pulled her close, told her she was brilliant, told her this could change everything, told her they could build something together, a real company, escape the corporate grind, create generational wealth for Emma. "It's yours," Victoria had said, meaning it, meaning she wanted him to succeed, wanted their family to thrive, wanted their daughter to grow up watching her parents build something meaningful. "Use it to start your company. I believe in you." That was her first mistake. Not the code, the trust. Marcus had taken Pathfinder, registered the patent under his name as sole inventor, and founded Blake Logistics 6 weeks later. He'd quit Amazon, maxed out 3 credit cards, taken out a second mortgage on their apartment, and launched with 2 ex-Amazon colleagues who knew operations but couldn't code their way out of a conditional statement. Victoria had stayed home with Emma, doing what Marcus called freelance coding, which really meant upgrading Pathfinder every time the system hit a technical wall. Every time Marcus couldn't explain to investors how the machine learning actually worked. Every time a demo failed 30 minutes before a pitch meeting, she'd fix it, debug it, rebuild entire modules while Emma napped or watched Sesame Street, always behind the scenes, always invisible, always unpaid except in promises of equity that somehow never materialized in actual paperwork. Now Victoria looked at the divorce papers and saw that invisibility codified into law. Marcus as sole inventor, Marcus as owner, Victoria as nothing. Arthur Chen shifted in his chair, leather creaking. The lawyer had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the uncomfortable expression of someone watching an injustice unfold, but bound by professional obligation to process the paperwork. "Mrs. Blake, I must advise you one final time to seek independent counsel. This settlement is highly unusual. You're walking away from assets valued at approximately $18 million. The company's Series C valuation puts Blake Logistics at $65 million. As spouse, you're entitled—" Victoria interrupted, voice quiet and steady, lacking the hysteria Marcus had spent 3 weeks preparing his legal team to handle. He'd expected tears, screaming, desperate negotiations, the chaotic emotions of a woman abandoned. "I don't need a lawyer, Arthur. I just want Emma to have stability, and I want this over." Marcus couldn't quite suppress the smile. His face tried to arrange itself into sympathy, but satisfaction leaked through around the edges. He'd been dreading this moment for months, ever since he'd served her the papers the same week he'd started sleeping with Sienna Ross, his 31-year-old marketing director with an Instagram following and zero interest in debugging Python. He'd hidden money in shell corporations, Nevada LLCs, Delaware, holding companies, Wyoming trusts. He'd backdated documents with a paralegal he'd paid under the table. He'd consulted 3 different attorneys on asset protection strategies. He'd wargamed every possible scenario of Victoria fighting back. But here she was surrendering, signing away millions without a fight. Exactly as he'd always known she would, because Victoria was weak, always had been. A librarian's daughter who'd gotten lucky marrying a man with vision and drive. She belonged in a cubicle, not a boardroom. She belonged in the background, not the spotlight. Victoria picked up the Mont Blanc pen, a gift she'd bought him for their 5th anniversary, back when she still believed anniversary gifts mattered, back when she thought their marriage was something worth celebrating. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name in clear, deliberate strokes at the bottom of page 12, Victoria L. Chen. Not Blake, never Blake. She'd kept her surname after marriage, a decision Marcus had hated. He'd argued it looked bad for a CEO's wife to have a different last name, that it signaled discord to investors, that it undermined his authority. She'd quietly refused one of the few battles she'd ever won. Now she understood why some instinct had made her hold on to her own name. She'd known even then that Marcus Blake's name was never truly hers to claim. She slid the pen across the mahogany desk, Then she did something Marcus didn't expect. She removed her wedding ring's simple platinum band with a small diamond. Nothing extravagant because they'd been graduate students when they married, surviving on ramen and optimism. She placed it carefully on top of the signed document. Marcus frowned, thrown off script. "Tori, don't be dramatic. That was my grandmother's." Victoria's gray eyes met his for the first time since she'd entered the office. Her voice was level, factual, devastating in its calm. "No. It was a cubic zirconia replacement I bought at Costco 3 years ago when you pawned the real one to cover the Series A shortfall. I never told you I knew." Silence dropped like a guillotine blade. Arthur Chen coughed into his fist, suddenly fascinated by the rain patterns on the window. Marcus's face went through several colors: confusion, recognition, embarrassment, anger, before settling on defensive indignation. "That was a temporary cash flow issue. I was going to—" "Goodbye, Marcus." Victoria stood picking up her purse. A worn Target tote bag, not the Prada shoulder bag Sienna carried to company events, not the status symbol accessories that Marcus's new life required. She smoothed her skirt, looked around the office one last time. The awards on the shelf proclaiming Marcus Blake as Seattle's rising tech innovator. The architectural models of the new distribution center in Kent. The oil painting of Marcus himself that hung behind the desk, commissioned after the Series B, funding a portrait of a visionary in his prime. She'd paid for all of it with code he couldn't write and algorithms he couldn't explain. But the office, the art, the empire, it all bore his name, his face, his story. "I'll pick up Emma from school on my days," Victoria said. "The custody schedule is in Appendix C." Marcus was already reaching for his phone, fingers itching to text Sienna. "It's done. I'm free. Meet you at Canlis in 20. Champagne on me. Take the town car at least," he offered the magnanimous Victor, throwing scraps to the defeated. "It's raining." "No, thank you. I'll take the bus." She walked to the door flat, soundless on the plush carpet. She didn't slam it, didn't cry, didn't give him the satisfaction of watching her break. The door clicked shut with quiet finality, the sound of an ending. Marcus exhaled, feeling lighter than he'd felt in months. Years, maybe. The suffocating weight of a boring marriage, a wife who'd stopped being interesting, a relationship that had become obligation instead of excitement, all of it lifted. He had the company. He had the house on Mercer Island with water views and a 3-car garage. He had Sienna, who looked perfect in photographs and never questioned his late nights or mysterious conference trips. Victoria was going back to her tiny apartment, her economy car, her anonymous life of mediocrity. She'd find some coding job at a startup, maybe scrape together enough for a down payment on a condo in Kent or Renton somewhere far from the tech elite. She'd fade into irrelevance while he soared. Arthur Chen gathered the papers, sliding them into a leather portfolio. The lawyer's expression was unreadable, professional mask firmly in place. But his voice carried something Marcus couldn't quite identify when he spoke. "Can you believe that? Not a single fight. She just gave up." Arthur frowned, clicking his briefcase closed. The sound was sharp in the quiet office. "It's the cleanest divorce I've ever processed, Marcus. Almost suspiciously clean. But it feels wrong. People don't just walk away from $18 million. Not without a reason." Marcus stood buttoning his Tom Ford Blazer purchased on the company card, a business expense because image mattered in tech, because looking successful was halfway to being successful. He checked his reflection in the glass wall overlooking the city. Perfect. Confident. The face of a man who'd just won. "Victoria isn't people," he said, grinning. "She's a mouse, and the mouse just scurried back to her hole. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a celebration dinner to attend." He grabbed his keys. Audi German Engineering leased through the company because everything was a tax write-off if you structured it correctly. Arthur Chen left with a briefcase full of documents that would be filed with King County Superior Court by end of business. The divorce would be final in 90 days. Marcus Blake, free man. Marcus Blake unencumbered by dead weight. Marcus Blake ready to take his company public and become Seattle's newest tech millionaire. As the office door closed behind his attorney, Marcus didn't notice three things that Victoria had left behind. First, she'd taken her laptop. The old MacBook Pro she'd used for 7 years, carrying it to coffee shops and libraries when Emma was at preschool, the machine that contained development logs and time-stamped comments and version histories that proved exactly who had written what and when. Second, she'd left a USB drive in the wastebasket beneath his desk. A tiny flash drive that looked like random trash, the kind of thing custodial staff would empty without a second glance. Except this drive contained a keylogger she'd installed on Marcus's computer 6 months ago after she'd found the first suspicious text message from Sienna. 6 months of every email, every password, every file access, every late-night chat with investors where Marcus promised capabilities the technology didn't actually have yet. 6 months of evidence meticulously collected and backed up to 3 separate cloud servers under accounts Marcus didn't know existed. Third, she was smiling. Not the shy, apologetic smile Marcus had known for a decade. A different smile entirely. Cold, calculated. The smile of someone who'd just finished setting a very long fuse and was walking away before the explosion. Victoria emerged onto 4th Avenue into the October drizzle that was Seattle's default weather setting. Rain misted her face, soaking into her cardigan, turning her hair from neat to disheveled in 30 seconds. She didn't pull out an umbrella. She just stood there on the sidewalk, letting the water wash over her, feeling the city's gray embrace. Her phone vibrated. One unread email. She pulled it from her purse, the cracked screen protector catching the diffused light from the overcast sky. Sender t.reynolds@reynoldstech.com. Subject: It's time. Message: 12 years ago you saved my son without asking for anything in return. Now I'm asking you to let me return the favor. I've spent 3 months investigating Marcus Blake. I know what he did. I know what he stole. And I'm offering you every resource at my disposal to take it back. Call me when you're ready. You don't have to be invisible anymore. Thomas Victoria stood in the rain reading those words 3 times. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally breaking through the numb composure she'd maintained in Marcus's office. She looked up at the Blake Logistics Tower, 20 stories of glass and steel and stolen dreams. Then she typed a reply with cold, wet fingers. Mr. Reynolds, I'm ready. Let's begin. She pressed send and slipped the phone back into her purse. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, the number 26 that would take her to Queen Anne, to the shoebox apartment Marcus had graciously allowed her to keep. She started walking, shoulders back, chin up, every step deliberate. Behind her, Marcus was probably already at Canlis, ordering champagne, celebrating his brilliant negotiation, his clean escape, his triumph over a marriage that had become a burden. He was probably telling Sienna about the signing, how Victoria had been so pathetic, so desperate, accepting scraps without a fight. He had no idea that Victoria Chen had stopped fighting his way years ago. She'd learned something Marcus would never understand because his ego was too loud to hear it. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. And she'd been strategizing for a very long time. The Queen Anne apartment was exactly what Marcus had described, a shoebox. 600 square feet on the 3rd floor of a 1970s building that smelled like old carpet and someone's perpetual cooking of fish. A kitchenette with a 2-burner hot plate and a refrigerator that hummed aggressive complaints at 3 in the morning. A bathroom where you could simultaneously sit on the toilet, brush your teeth at the sink, and test the shower temperature without standing up. The previous tenant had left a stain on the carpet shaped disturbingly like the Australian continent, but it had one thing. The Mercer Island mansion with its water views and chef's kitchen had never provided it was hers. Victoria set her bag on the IKEA table. She'd assembled herself with an Allen wrench and determination, following Swedish pictogram instructions that made more sense than most of her marriage. Emma wouldn't be home for another 2 hours. Marcus's mother had picked her up from school, insulating their daughter from the divorce proceedings as much as possible. 8-year-olds shouldn't have to watch their parents' lives disintegrate. Emma deserved better than that. She deserved to still believe in fairy tales and happy endings for a little while longer. Victoria walked to the window. She could see the Space Needle from here, lit against the gray afternoon, a slim middle finger of hope rising above the city's perpetual clouds. Seattle had been her home for 15 years. Microsoft headquarters in Redmond, where she'd learned enterprise-scale software architecture. Marriage to Marcus in a courthouse ceremony because they were broke graduate students. Pregnancy, motherhood, the slow grinding erosion of self that came from being someone's invisible support system. All here in this rain-soaked city where innovation was currency and credit was everything. She made it to the bathroom before the first sob broke free. 10 years. She'd given him 10 years. Not just of marriage, of her brain, her creativity, her genius. Every time Blake Logistics had announced a breakthrough, it was because Victoria had stayed up until 4 in the morning fixing Marcus's broken implementation, rewriting his inefficient loops, patching security vulnerabilities he didn't even know existed because he'd never actually learned to code beyond copying snippets from Stack Overflow. She sat on the bathroom floor tile cold through her skirt and let herself shatter. Just for a few minutes. Just enough to get it out. 3 years ago, Blake Logistics had nearly died. A competitor called Fast Ship Dynamics had released a routing system that was faster, smarter, more efficient than Pathfinder. Marcus had panicked. Actually panicked, pacing their bedroom at midnight, convinced the company was finished, convinced investors would pull out, convinced the board would demand his resignation. Victoria had been feeding Emma, half-asleep, milk-drunk baby, drowsy in her arms. She'd asked to see Fast Ship's technical specs. Marcus had forwarded the leaked documents to her personal email, corporate espionage technically, but tech companies spied on each other constantly and called it competitive intelligence. She'd spent 72 hours reverse engineering Fast Ship's system while Emma slept, while Marcus spiraled, while the future of Blake Logistics hung in the balance. Then she'd built something better. Pathfinder 2.0. Machine learning integration that adapted to driver behavior patterns. Predictive analytics that forecasted traffic congestion before it happened. Dynamic rerouting that processed real-time variables at a speed Fast Ship's system couldn't touch. She'd handed Marcus the code on a flash drive at 3 in the morning, eyes burning from screen glare, back aching from hunching over her laptop on the couch. Because the bedroom was Emma's, and she didn't want to wake her. Marcus had stared at the implementation, at the elegant architecture, at the sheer sophistication of what she'd created in 3 days while he'd been useless with panic. "Tori, how did you, this is..." She'd tried to smile through exhaustion that went bone deep. "I used to be good at this. Remember?" He'd kissed her forehead, pulled her close, told her she was amazing, told her they were a team, told her she was the brains and he was the face, and together they were building something that mattered. That was her second mistake. Believing him when he said together. Believing partnership meant anything beyond her labor and his credit. Marcus had presented Pathfinder 2.0 at the next board meeting as his innovation. Gave interviews to TechCrunch, GeekWire, Bloomberg. Got called Seattle's rising tech visionary by Forbes. Did a keynote at AWS reInvent about the future of logistics AI. Never mentioned Victoria's name once. Not in presentations, not in interviews, not in the patent application that listed Marcus Blake as sole inventor. She'd told herself it was fine. They were married. His success was her success. The company's growth meant Emma's college fund, meant financial security, meant opportunities their daughter would never have had otherwise. Visibility didn't matter as long as the work mattered, except invisibility had a cost she hadn't calculated. The cost of watching someone else wear your achievements like a costume. The cost of silence when the truth was screaming inside you. The cost of being erased. Then she'd found the texts. 6 months ago, picking up Marcus's phone by accident, they had identical iPhone models. Easy mistake. A notification had lit up the screen. Sienna. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you in that hotel room. When can we do it again? Victoria's world had tilted sideways. She'd scrolled up, hands shaking, knowing she shouldn't look but unable to stop. Months of messages. Hundreds of them. Sienna. You deserve someone who matches your ambition. Victoria is holding you back. Marcus. I know. She's brilliant with code, but she has zero social intelligence. She doesn't understand what it takes to build a real company. I'm doing this in spite of her, not because of her. Sienna. Once you're free of her, we can be together publicly. I'll be the partner you deserve. Marcus. Soon. The lawyers are drawing up the prenup. I'm structuring it so she gets almost nothing. She's too timid to fight. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. The worst one had come 3 weeks before he'd served the divorce papers. Marcus, you know what the funny thing is? The technology that made this company worth millions? I didn't build it. Victoria did. All of it. But she was stupid enough to just hand it to me. Never asked for equity, never asked for credit, just gave it away because she believed in us. Can you believe that? And now I'm going to divorce her and she'll get nothing while I keep everything she created. It's almost too easy. Victoria had read that message 5 times, each word a knife between ribs. Not because Marcus was leaving, not because he'd found someone else, but because he was going to erase her from history. Pretend she'd never existed. Rewrite their decade together into a story where he was the genius and she was the lucky wife who'd somehow married above her station. She'd very carefully put his phone back where she'd found it. Then she'd walked to her laptop and done something she'd never done before. She'd installed monitoring software on Marcus's computer, a keylogger that captured every keystroke, every password, every email, every file he opened. Corporate espionage, technically, probably illegal. She didn't care. He'd stolen her life's work. She was going to document every lie he'd told while doing it. For 6 months, she'd collected evidence. Emails where Marcus admitted to investors that he couldn't actually code. Messages where he asked Victoria to fix critical bugs hours before investor demos. Calls where he promised capabilities the system didn't have yet, knowing Victoria would somehow deliver before the deadline. Internal documents where he listed himself as sole technical contributor despite doing 0 development work. 6 months of evidence uploaded to encrypted cloud storage backed up in 3 separate accounts. Marcus didn't know existed, time-stamped and lawyer-ready. Victoria had been patient. She'd smiled through the divorce papers, agreed to the settlement, signed away millions without protest. Let Marcus think he'd won. Let him think she was weak, defeated, pathetic. Because the weakest-looking person in the room is often the one who understands the game better than anyone else. And Victoria had been playing a much longer game than Marcus could imagine. Her phone rang, vibrating against the bathroom tile. She wiped her eyes, steadied, her breathing, checked the caller ID. Thomas Reynolds. She'd known he'd call. She'd been waiting for this. Victoria cleared her throat, made her voice level and professional despite the tears still wet on her face. "Mr. Reynolds." The voice on the other end was warm, textured with a Texas drawl that sounded like home, despite coming from a man she'd only met once 12 years ago. "Victoria, I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry." "How did you know?" "I keep tabs on people who matter to me, and you, young lady, matter very much. You saved my son's life. That's not something a father forgets." Summer of 2012, Lake Chelan, Washington. Victoria had been 23, fresh out of UW with a computer science degree and a job offer from Microsoft starting in September. She'd gone to the lake with college friends for one last hurrah before adult life began. She'd been walking the shoreline when she heard screaming. A boy, maybe 10 years old, thrashing in the water 30 feet from shore. Drowning. Adults on the beach were frozen, yelling for help but not moving, that terrible paralysis that happens when crisis strikes and brains short-circuit. Victoria hadn't thought. She'd dropped her phone in the sand and run. The water had been shockingly cold, the current stronger than it looked from shore. But she'd reached the boy, grabbed him under the arms, kicked toward the beach with everything she had. Her lifeguard certification from high school summer jobs came back in muscle memory. Approach from behind. Keep his head above water. Don't let panic make him grab you and pull you both under. They'd made it to shore. Paramedics came. The boy coughed up lake water but was otherwise fine. Victoria had sat wrapped in towels, shaking from adrenaline and cold, insisting she was okay, just glad he was safe. A man had approached her an hour later. Tall, gray-haired, expensive polo shirt with a subtle logo she didn't recognize. Eyes red from crying. "You saved my son." His voice had broken on the words. "I'm Thomas Reynolds. I don't know how to repay." "You don't need to," Victoria had said, meaning it. "I'm just glad Michael's okay." Thomas had pressed a business card into her hand anyway. Heavy cardstock embossed lettering. Thomas J. Reynolds, Chief Executive Officer, Reynolds Tech Group. A Seattle address she later learned was the headquarters of an $8 billion cloud computing and AI empire. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. I owe you a life debt. That's not something I take lightly. Victoria had tucked the card in her wallet and forgotten about it. Until 6 months ago, when she'd realized she was going to war with Marcus and needed weapons he couldn't match. Then she'd remembered Thomas Reynolds, remembered his face when he'd hugged his son Michael safe and breathing, remembered him saying, "I owe you a life debt." She'd emailed him, asked if the offer still stood, explained what Marcus had done, what he was planning to do, asked if Thomas could help her build an airtight case. Thomas had responded within an hour. "I've been waiting 12 years to repay you. Let's get to work." Now sitting on her bathroom floor in the aftermath of signing divorce papers, Victoria listened to Thomas Reynolds offer her a future she'd stopped believing was possible. "Victoria, I want you to come work for me. Chief Technology Officer of Reynolds Tech. Salary $850,000 annually plus equity. You start Monday." She couldn't breathe. "Mr. Reynolds, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. I've seen your code. I had my people analyze the Pathfinder architecture that's publicly available through Blake Logistics patent filings. You're a genius, Victoria. The kind of genius my company needs. This isn't charity. This is me recognizing talent when I see it. Marcus stole from you. And starting Monday, we're going to systematically dismantle his empire and take back what's yours. Legally, publicly, completely." Victoria's heart was hammering. "How?" "I've had investigators working for 3 months. We have evidence of intellectual property theft, securities, fraud, tax evasion, forgery. We have witness testimony from engineers who worked with Marcus. We have your development logs proving you wrote the code. We have emails where Marcus explicitly admits he can't code and needs you to fix critical systems." That's a lot. That's just the civil case. The criminal charges come next. SEC fraud for lying to investors. IRS evasion for hiding income in shell corporations. Wire fraud for interstate financial misrepresentation. Victoria, by the time we're done, Marcus Blake won't just lose his company, he'll lose his freedom. She should have felt triumph, vindication, the savage satisfaction of watching an enemy fall. Instead, she felt something more complicated. Grief, maybe. Not for Marcus, but for who he could have been. For the marriage they might have had if he'd chosen partnership over parasitism. "What do I have to do?" "First, come work for me. Build something new. Pathfinder 3.0. Your vision, your code, your name on the patents. Let the tech world see what you can do when you're not being erased. Second, we gather every piece of evidence and build cases, civil and criminal. My legal team is the best in the country. Former federal prosecutors, people who've taken down Enron executives and hedge fund criminals. Third, we wait. Marcus is planning to take Blake Logistics public in 6 months. IPO scheduled for April 15th, tax day, ironically. When that IPO launches, when he's about to become a paper millionaire, when he thinks he's finally won, that's when we file everything simultaneously. Civil lawsuit for intellectual property theft, criminal complaints to the SEC and FBI, public revelation of who actually built Pathfinder. Victoria closed her eyes, seeing it play out. The timeline, the devastation, the absolute destruction of Marcus Blake's carefully constructed myth. He'll be ruined. He ruined himself. We're just documenting it. So what do you say, Victoria? Are you ready to stop being invisible? She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Red eyes, tear-streaked face, wet hair plastered to her skull. She looked defeated, broken, exactly how Marcus expected her to look. But underneath something else was stirring, something cold and sharp and absolutely certain. Yes, I'm ready. When do we start? I'll have my driver pick you up Monday morning, 7 a.m. Bring your laptop and any documentation you have. We'll get you set up in your new office, introduce you to the executive team, and start building your case. Victoria. Yes. What you did for Michael, saving him without thinking, without asking for anything, that showed me who you are. You act when it matters. Now it's my turn to act. We're going to get you justice. Not revenge. Justice. There's a difference. What's the difference? Revenge is about making someone suffer. Justice is about making things right. I want your name on those patents. I want the truth in the public record. I want Emma to grow up knowing her mother is brilliant, not that her mother was a doormat. That's justice. Victoria felt tears coming again, but different ones, not grief. Hope. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Call me Thomas. We're partners now. Get some rest. Monday we change the narrative. The call ended. Victoria sat in the bathroom, silence phone warm in her hand. Future suddenly vast and terrifying and possible. A key turned in the front door. Emma's voice, bright and uncomplicated, called out, "Mom, Grammy dropped me off. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" Victoria wiped her face, stood up, checked herself in the mirror. Red eyes, but she could blame that on allergies. Fake smile, but 8-year-olds believed their mothers when they said everything was fine. She walked out to find Emma dropping her backpack by the door, ponytail, askew, gap-toothed grin, infectious. "Hey, baby, how was school?" "Good, we're learning about algorithms in computer class. Mrs. Patterson said an algorithm is like a recipe for the computer. Is that right?" Victoria knelt down, pulled her daughter close. Emma smelled like playground and pencil shavings and innocence. "That's exactly right. An algorithm is step-by-step instructions for solving a problem. Like how you solve problems with code. Just like that." Emma pulled back, studying her mother's face with the unsettling perception children sometimes have, seeing past masks adults thought were impenetrable. "Mom, are you sad about Dad?" Victoria chose her words carefully. "I'm sad the marriage ended, but I'm not sad about the future. Sometimes things have to end so new things can begin." "Are you going to be okay?" Victoria hugged her daughter tighter. "More than okay, I promise. Now go wash your hands. Mac and cheese coming up." Emma ran to the bathroom, leaving Victoria alone in the tiny kitchenette with its 2 burners and its humming refrigerator and its view of someone else's apartment building across the alley. This wasn't the Mercer Island mansion with its chef's kitchen and water views, but it was hers. And starting Monday she'd have the resources to build something bigger. Not a house, an empire, a real one, built on her code, carrying her name, impossible to erase. Victoria pulled out her laptop, the old MacBook Pro she'd had for 7 years, battered but functional. She opened her encrypted cloud storage, gigabytes of evidence, development logs showing every commit she'd ever made to Pathfinder, email chains proving Marcus had repeatedly asked her to fix critical bugs, text messages where he admitted to colleagues that he couldn't code, financial documents showing shell corporations in Nevada and Delaware designed to hide income. Everything she needed to prove Marcus Blake was a fraud. She thought about the USB drive she'd left in his office wastebasket, the keylogger tracking his every move. By now, the cleaning crew had probably emptied the trash, sending that drive to a landfill somewhere. It didn't matter. She'd already uploaded everything to secure servers. The data was backed up, encrypted, and ready. Marcus thought he'd won. He was probably at Canlis right now, champagne in hand, celebrating his freedom. Tomorrow he'd wake up in his Mercer Island house, take his morning run along the water, go to the office, and continue building his IPO pitch. 6 months of road shows and investor meetings and carefully constructed narratives about the visionary CEO who'd revolutionized logistics. He had no idea the fuse was already burning. No idea that Victoria Chen had spent 6 months building a case that would destroy everything he'd stolen. No idea that the mouse he'd dismissed was actually a wolf who'd been patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Emma came back, hands dripping wet because 8-year-olds never quite mastered the concept of drying completely. "Can I show you something?" She pulled out her school tablet, opened a coding app. "I made a program that draws shapes. Look." The screen showed a simple Python script. Basic, but the logic was sound. Loops and conditionals arranged correctly, syntax clean. Victoria felt pride swell in her chest. Emma, this is really good. When did you learn to do this? Mrs. Patterson's been teaching us. She said I'm one of the best in the class. Mom, can I be a programmer like you when I grow up? Victoria looked at her daughter, saw herself at that age full of curiosity and potential, and the naive belief that talent mattered more than gender or credit or visibility. You can be anything you want. But Em, I need to tell you something important. Emma sat down at the table, sensing seriousness in her mother's tone. You're going to hear some things in the next few months about Dad and me, about the company. It might be confusing or scary, but I need you to know that everything I'm doing because it's the right thing. Not because I'm angry, not because I want to hurt anyone, but because lies hurt more than truth, and the truth matters. What kind of things? Dad told people he built something called Pathfinder, but I built it, and soon everyone is going to know. That might make Dad upset, but it's still the truth. Emma nodded, slowly processing. Like when I lied about breaking the lamp and you made me tell Grammy the truth even though it was hard. Exactly like that. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but we do it anyway. Will Dad be mad at you? Probably, but that's okay. Being right is more important than being liked. Emma hugged her mother suddenly, fiercely. I think you're brave. Victoria held her daughter, feeling the weight of what was coming. The lawsuits, the publicity, the inevitable moment when Marcus realized he'd underestimated the woman he'd erased. The criminal charges, the trial, the moment when her daughter would see her father arrested. Was she doing the right thing, or was this revenge dressed up as justice? She didn't know, but she knew she was done being invisible, done letting someone else wear her achievements like stolen clothing, done teaching her daughter that silence was safety. Her phone buzzed. Email from Thomas Reynolds. Subject: your new office. Attached was a photo. Corner office, 40th floor of Lincoln Tower in Bellevue, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. Dual monitors. A door that closed. Message: Monday you get to see the city from the top. You've earned this view. Victoria looked around her shoebox apartment, then at the photo of what was coming. Not just an office. A future where her name meant something, where Emma could Google Victoria Chen and find patents and papers and press coverage about the woman who'd built Pathfinder, not the footnote who'd married the genius. She opened a new email to Thomas Reynolds and typed, I'll be there. Let's build something they can't erase. She pressed send and closed the laptop. Monday was 3 days away, 72 hours to prepare for war. For the first time in a decade, Victoria Chen was about to be seen, and Marcus Blake was about to learn that the most expensive things in life are the ones you steal from people patient enough to document the theft. Outside Seattle, rain fell steady and gray, washing the city clean for whatever came next. The Reynolds Tech headquarters occupied 4 floors of Lincoln Tower in downtown Bellevue, glass and steel, rising above Lake Washington like a monument to what happened when vision met execution. Victoria stood in the lobby Monday morning at 6:57, 3 minutes early because old habits died hard, and being on time meant being 10 minutes early in the world she'd come from. Thomas Reynolds met her at the elevator bank himself. At 65, he carried the weathered confidence of someone who'd built empires and survived downturns, silver hair catching the morning light, filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. He extended his hand, grip firm, but not crushing. Victoria, welcome to your first day. The elevator rose 40 floors in silence that felt contemplative rather than awkward. Thomas broke it as the doors opened onto the executive suite. I want you to meet someone before we get started. Someone who's been waiting 12 years to say thank you properly. A young man stood in the reception area, early 20s, Stanford hoodie, and the kind of relaxed posture that came from growing up knowing the world was built for people like him. But his eyes were kind, genuinely warm when he saw Victoria. Miss Chen. Michael Reynolds extended his hand. I never got to properly thank you for saving my life. Victoria shook his hand, memories flooding back. The boy thrashing in Lake Chelan, cold water, adrenaline, the desperate kick toward shore. You were a kid, I did what anyone would do. Most people froze on that beach. You ran into the water. That's the difference between good people and great people." Michael's voice carried absolute sincerity. "Dad's told me the story 100 times. It's why I went into tech. I wanted to build things that help people the way you helped me." Thomas put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael just finished his PhD in computer science from Stanford. He's joining Reynolds Tech as a senior engineer. Thought you two should meet." They talked briefly, Michael asking technical questions about distributed systems, Victoria answering with the easy fluency of someone who actually understood architecture at the foundational level. Not memorized presentations, real knowledge built from thousands of hours writing actual code. Then Thomas guided Victoria to her new office. Corner view, exactly as promised. Lake Washington stretched blue-gray to the east, the Cascade Mountains rising beyond like protective sentinels. Dual monitors already set up ergonomic chair, a door that closed and locked. "This is yours," Thomas said simply. "Take 15 minutes to settle in. Then we're meeting with the legal team to go over strategy." Victoria set her laptop bag on the desk. Her desk. Her office. Her name would be on the directory on the org chart on the patents she'd file. Not invisible. Not erased. Present. She looked out at the lake, at the city spreading across the water, at the future opening wider than she'd imagined possible 3 days ago. Then she opened her laptop and got to work. The conference room on the 41st floor held a war council. Thomas sat at the head of the table. To his right, Nathan Pierce, 55, silver-haired former federal prosecutor with a record of taking down Enron executives and hedge fund criminals. Sharp eyes that missed nothing, the patient demeanor of someone who'd built careers on airtight cases. To Thomas's left, a younger attorney named Sarah Kim, 30s, ruthlessly efficient, the kind of lawyer who could recite case law from memory and find procedural loopholes that made defendants weep. Victoria sat across from them, feeling the weight of what was about to begin. Nathan opened a leather folder, slides projected onto the screen behind him. "Let's talk about what we have on Marcus Blake." The first slide showed a timeline, 7 years of Blake logistics mapped against Victoria's development logs. March 2018, Victoria Chen writes the initial Pathfinder algorithm. We have time-stamped commits from her personal GitHub account. 10,847 commits over 7 years, all from username VCHEN_codes. Nathan clicked to the next slide. Patent documents. April 2018, Marcus Blake files patent application listing himself as sole inventor. Victoria's name appears nowhere. That's theft of intellectual property textbook definition. Another slide. Email chains. June 2019, Marcus emails Victoria asking her to fix critical bugs 18 hours before an investor demo. Quote, "Tori, the whole system is crashing. I don't understand the error logs. Please help. I'm begging you." Victoria responds within 3 hours with a complete rewrite of the module. Sarah Kim leaned forward. "We have 847 similar emails. Marcus repeatedly asking Victoria to debug, optimize, and rewrite critical systems. Any reasonable court will conclude he couldn't have invented technology he demonstrably can't maintain." The slides continued, each one another nail in Marcus's coffin. November 2020, Blake Logistics raises $12 million in Series B funding. Pitch deck claims proprietary AI developed in-house by our technical team led by CEO Marcus Blake. That technical team consisted of Marcus and 2 junior developers who'd been hired 6 months prior. The AI was entirely Victoria's work. That's securities fraud, lying to investors to obtain funding. Nathan's voice was clinical, factual, devastating. "We also have the offshore accounts. Shell corporations in Nevada, Delaware, and Wyoming. Blake Holdings, LLC-MJB Consulting Sterling Solutions. $2.4 million hidden to avoid taxes. That's IRS evasion, federal crime." Thomas interjected. "How solid is the forgery case?" Sarah pulled up side-by-side signatures. Victoria's real signature from her Microsoft employment documents versus the signature on IP transfer agreements allegedly signed during her marriage to Marcus. Handwriting analysis from 3 separate certified experts. All conclude the signatures on the IP transfer documents are forgeries. Different pen pressure, different loop formation, different slant. Marcus forged Victoria's signature to claim ownership of technology he didn't create. That's fraud, identity theft, and intellectual property theft. Victoria stared at the forged signatures. Her name, but not her hand. Marcus had literally stolen her identity to build his empire. Nathan turned to Victoria. Here's the timeline we're proposing. We spend the next 5 months doing 3 things simultaneously. He ticked off fingers. 1, Victoria, you develop Pathfinder 3.0 here at Reynolds Tech. New code, better algorithms, your name on every patent. We establish your credentials publicly, conference speeches, academic papers, media interviews. The world needs to see that Victoria Chen is a genius, not a footnote. 2, we quietly starve Blake Logistics. Reynolds Tech starts signing their major clients. Amazon, Nordstrom, Costco. We offer better rates, better technology, better service. Marcus's revenue drops, but he doesn't understand why. He panics, makes mistakes, creates more evidence. 3, we build airtight legal cases. Civil lawsuit for IP theft filed in King County Superior Court. Criminal complaints to the SEC, FBI, and IRS. Everything ready to file simultaneously. Sarah took over. April 15th, Marcus's IPO day. That's when we strike. Morning of the IPO, we file civil charges. SEC and FBI get evidence packages. By noon, federal agents are raiding Blake Logistics. By evening, Marcus Blake is in custody. The IPO collapses. His company is seized. His assets are frozen. Justice. Victoria's stomach twisted. This was real. Not fantasy revenge, but actual destruction of a man's life. Yes, he'd stolen from her. Yes, he deserved consequences. But hearing it laid out so clinically made it feel less like justice and more like annihilation. What happens to the employees? Her voice was quieter than intended. Blake Logistics has 63 people working there. Most of them had nothing to do with Marcus's fraud. Thomas's expression softened. We're not monsters, Victoria. Once the company is seized, Reynolds Tech will acquire the assets. We'll offer employment to every non-executive employee. Nobody loses their job except the people who enabled the fraud. And Marcus? Nathan's face was unreadable. He's facing 25 years in federal prison. Securities fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. The U.S. attorney will want to make an example. White-collar criminals don't usually get mercy. Victoria thought about Emma. 8 years old, about to watch her father get arrested, about to learn that Daddy was a criminal, about to grow up with a parent in prison. Can we build in the possibility of a plea deal, something that acknowledges guilt but isn't maximum sentencing? Nathan frowned. Victoria, he tried to destroy you. He stole your life's work, divorced you to keep everything, and planned to erase you from history. Why would you want mercy for him? Because Emma deserves better than a father in prison until she's 30. Because revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Because I want him to face consequences, but I don't want him destroyed beyond the possibility of redemption. Thomas studied her across the table. You're a better person than he deserves. But yes, we can structure this to leave room for a plea deal if Marcus shows genuine remorse. The goal is accountability, not cruelty. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Details about discovery processes, witness lists, expert testimony. Victoria's head spun with legal terminology and strategic considerations, but underneath the complexity, the core remained simple. Marcus had stolen. She was taking it back. At noon, Thomas dismissed the legal team. He and Victoria remained in the conference room. Seattle's skyline spreading beyond the windows. How are you holding up? Victoria exhaled slowly. Terrified. This is real warfare, not hypothetical justice. It is. And you need to be sure, absolutely certain, that you want to proceed. Once we file, there's no pulling back. Marcus will fight with everything he has. It will be public, ugly, and brutal. Emma will see all of it. Are you prepared for that? Victoria thought about 10 years of invisibility. 10 years of watching Marcus accept credit for her work. 10 years of being told she was helping when she was actually building. 10 years of her daughter watching her mother be erased. I'm prepared. Emma needs to see that women don't accept theft quietly. She needs to learn that speaking truth matters more than keeping peace. I'm doing this for her as much as for me. Thomas nodded. Then let's get to work. Your first assignment, I want you at the AWS re:Invent conference in Vegas next month. Keynote speech on the future of logistics AI. 15,000 tech professionals live streamed to millions. We're going to make sure Victoria Chen's name means something before we destroy Marcus Blake's. 3 months passed in a blur of code and strategy. Victoria rebuilt Pathfinder from the ground up, incorporating machine learning models that made the original look like a child's toy. Pathfinder 3.0 used neural networks to predict traffic patterns before they formed, integrated weather satellite data to route around storms that hadn't formed yet, and employed reinforcement learning that got smarter with every delivery completed. She published papers in academic journals, gave technical talks at smaller conferences, warming up for the Vegas keynote. Built her reputation methodically, deliberately creating a public record that said, Victoria Chen is a genius in her own right, not Marcus Blake's shadow. Meanwhile, Reynolds Tech's sales team quietly approached Blake Logistics' biggest clients. Amazon was first to switch, enticed by 40% better efficiency metrics and half the cost. Then Nordstrom, then Costco, Target, and REI. One by one, the clients Marcus had spent years cultivating moved to Reynolds Tech. Marcus panicked exactly as predicted. His CFO, David Park, sent increasingly desperate emails about revenue dropping 28% in Q4. Board members demanded explanations. Marcus had none that made sense. Competition was normal in tech, but this felt coordinated, targeted. He was right. It was. Victoria watched from a distance, tracking Blake Logistics' decline through industry reports and Nathan Pierce's investigative updates. Part of her felt guilty, 63 employees watching their company crumble, uncertain about their futures. But Thomas had promised to save those jobs, and Thomas Reynolds didn't make empty promises. The guilt over Marcus was more complicated. She'd loved him once, believed in him, trusted him with her best work and her vulnerable heart. Now she was systematically destroying everything he'd built on the foundation of that trust. Was this justice or revenge dressed in legal paperwork? She didn't know, but she knew she wasn't stopping. December brought the AWS re:Invent conference in Las Vegas. 15,000 attendees packed into the Venetian resort, tech professionals from every major company hungry for the next innovation. Victoria stood backstage, heart hammering, waiting for her cue. The introduction came from the conference organizer, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation, who'd been fighting visibility battles in tech for 20 years. Our next speaker has been working in silence for too long. She's the newly appointed CTO of Reynolds Tech, the architect behind the most sophisticated logistics AI in existence, and as of last month, the published author of groundbreaking research on predictive routing algorithms. Please welcome Victoria Chen. The applause was polite but not overwhelming. Most of the audience had never heard of her. That was about to change. Victoria walked onto the stage, the lights bright enough to wash out the crowd, but not quite hide their faces. Thousands of people, millions watching the live stream. She reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and took one steadying breath. Then she began. "Thank you. I'm not used to being seen." The audience quieted, sensing something different in her tone. Not the usual tech bravado, something rawer. "For 7 years I wrote code in the middle of the night while my daughter slept. I solved problems nobody knew existed. I built systems that powered a billion-dollar company. And I did it all in silence." She let that land. "Because I was told that's what good wives do. Support from the shadows. Don't seek credit. Don't be difficult. I was told my job was to make my husband successful, not to be successful myself. The room was absolutely silent now. This wasn't a typical technical keynote. This was confession, testimony, truth spoken into microphones that carried to every corner of the tech world. Last month, a judge ruled that I am the inventor of the Pathfinder logistics algorithm. That ruling didn't just give me back my intellectual property, it gave me back my voice. She clicked to the first slide. Pathfinder 3.0 architecture diagram, beautiful in its complexity. But I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about the future. This is Pathfinder 3.0. It's not an upgrade, it's a revolution. For the next 30 minutes, Victoria walked through the technical architecture with the fluency of someone who'd written every line herself. She explained neural network integration, predictive analytics, real-time optimization at scales previous systems couldn't touch. She showed benchmark data, 47% reduction in delivery times, 38% decrease in fuel costs, 52% improvement in driver satisfaction. The audience was riveted, not just by the technology, but by her, by the quiet authority in her voice, by the absolute mastery of material that couldn't be faked or stolen or claimed by someone else. She finished the technical portion and clicked to a final slide. A quote in simple white text on black background. Here's what I want you to understand. I'm not special. There are thousands of women in tech right now who are being erased, whose code is being credited to male colleagues, whose ideas are being stolen in meetings, whose brilliance is being dismissed as support work. We're told to be humble, but there's a difference between humility and invisibility. The applause started building like thunder approaching. I didn't file that lawsuit for money. I filed it because my daughter was watching. Emma is 8 years old. She's learning to code. And I refuse to teach her that women should hide their intelligence to make men comfortable. I refuse to teach her that silence is safety. The auditorium exploded. 15,000 people on their feet, applause deafening the kind of ovation that tech conferences rarely produced. Not polite appreciation, recognition, solidarity. The moment when a movement found its voice. Victoria stood at the podium, overwhelmed, watching a sea of faces, many of them women, many crying, giving her something Marcus had never allowed visibility. Backstage afterward, she was swarmed, reporters wanting interviews, women thanking her through tears. A young engineer from Google, maybe 25, grabbed her hand. "Miss Chen, I quit my job yesterday. My manager kept taking credit for my code. I was afraid to speak up. But watching you just now, you gave me courage. Thank you." Victoria hugged her. "What's your name?" "Priya. Priya Lakshmi." "Priya, don't let fear silence you. Your voice matters. And if you need legal help, email me. We have resources for women fighting IP theft." By evening, Victoria's speech had 12 million views on YouTube. Tech media exploded with coverage. TechCrunch, Victoria Chen's viral speech, "Silence is not safety." Bloomberg, the woman behind Pathfinder, finally gets her due. Forbes, from invisible to unstoppable, the Victoria Chen story. Twitter became a firestorm of support. Women sharing their own stories of erasure, of stolen credit, of fighting to be seen. The hashtag silence is not safety trended globally. Victoria sat in her hotel room that night, emotionally wrung out, watching her phone light up with messages. Congratulations from colleagues, interview requests from major media, and one email that made her breath catch. From David Park, CFO, Blake Logistics subject. "We need to talk, Miss Chen. I saw your speech. I've worked for Marcus for 5 years and I never knew the truth about Pathfinder. I have information you'll want. Call me." Victoria forwarded the email to Nathan Pierce with a single line, "Is this a trap or an opportunity?" Nathan's response came within minutes. "Opportunity. I'll set up a meeting. This is the break we've been waiting for." 2 weeks later, Victoria sat in a conference room at Nathan Pierce's law office in downtown Seattle. David Park sat across from her, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. Mid-40s, the haunted look of someone who'd discovered his career was built on lies. Nathan began the questioning. "Mr. Park, you reached out to Miss Chen after her Vegas keynote. Why?" David's voice was strained. "Because I realized I'd been complicit in fraud. For years I processed payments and managed finances without questioning where the technology came from. Marcus told me he'd developed Pathfinder. I believed him because I had no reason not to, but after Victoria's speech I started looking at old emails, old files. I found things." He slid a folder across the table. Email chains, financial documents, board meeting minutes. March 2019. Marcus tells the board he's the technical genius behind our AI. But I found emails from the same week where he's asking Victoria to fix critical bugs. He literally couldn't understand error logs, but he was taking credit for the system in investor meetings. Victoria felt vindication and nausea mixing. Vindication because here was independent confirmation. Nausea because David had enabled this for years. Nathan pressed, "Did you ever witness Marcus writing code?" "Never, not once. Marcus handles business development and investor relations. When technical problems arise, he always said he'd handle it offline. I assumed he had engineers working on it. I didn't realize he was emailing his wife to fix everything." "Will you testify to this in court?" David hesitated, fear crossing his face. "Marcus threatened me. After Victoria's speech went viral, he pulled me into his office and told me if I ever spoke to her or testified against him, he'd destroy my career. He'd make sure I never worked in tech again. He said he had connections, leverage ways to ruin me." Nathan's expression went cold. "Did you record this threat?" "No, but I have texts. He followed up in writing." David pulled out his phone, showed message threads. "Marcus Blake. If Park testifies, I'll bury him. I have dirt on everyone. Nobody crosses me and survives." Nathan photographed the texts, face grim. "That's witness intimidation. Federal crime. Mr. Park, are you willing to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for immunity?" "What does that mean?" "It means if you testify honestly about what you witnessed, the government won't charge you as an accessory to fraud. You walk away clean. Marcus doesn't." David looked at Victoria. "Will my testimony actually help?" Victoria met his eyes. "It will prove Marcus couldn't have invented technology he demonstrably can't maintain. It corroborates everything in my development logs. Yes, it helps." "Then I'll do it. I'll testify. I'm tired of enabling lies." After David left, Nathan turned to Victoria with something approaching triumph. "We have him. Former CFO testifying that Marcus can't code, that he threatened witnesses, that he lied to the board. Combined with your evidence, this case is airtight. When do we file?" "February. We're accelerating the timeline. Marcus is already panicking about lost revenue. If we wait until April, he might do something desperate, flee the country, destroy evidence, hurt someone. We strike in 6 weeks. Victoria's heart raced. 6 weeks. Then the war became public, visible, irreversible. She thought about Emma, who'd asked last night why Daddy hadn't called in 3 weeks, who still loved her father despite the divorce, who had no idea what was coming. "Nathan, I need a promise. When this goes to trial, when Marcus is facing sentencing, I want the chance to speak, to ask for measured justice, not maximum punishment. Can you guarantee that—" Nathan studied her. "Why would you ask for mercy?" "Because Emma deserves a father who learns from consequences, not a father destroyed beyond redemption. Because I want justice, not vengeance. There's a difference." "Thomas warned me you'd say something like that." "Yes, I'll make sure you can speak at sentencing, but Victoria, understand this. Marcus is facing serious federal charges. The U.S. attorney will want maximum sentences. Your voice matters, but it's not the only voice in the room." "I understand. I just need to know I tried." Nathan nodded. "Fair enough. Now let's talk about the civil trial strategy." January brought preparation intensity that made Victoria's Microsoft days look leisurely. Depositions, document review, expert witness coordination. She spent hours with forensic code analysts who examined every line of Pathfinder, confirming authorship through style analysis, commenting patterns, algorithmic approaches unique to Victoria's graduate research. She met with the FBI's white-collar crime unit walking agents through the offshore shell corporations Marcus had created, explained how he'd hidden income in Nevada LLCs and Delaware holding companies, routing money through Wyoming trusts to avoid taxes and disguise the flow. She gave her deposition for the civil case 8 hours of questions from Marcus's attorneys trying to poke holes in her story, trying to suggest she'd been compensated through marriage, that contributing to a spouse's company was normal, that her claims were motivated by bitterness over the divorce. Nathan Pierce destroyed those arguments with timestamps and emails and irrefutable evidence that Victoria had created intellectual property Marcus had then fraudulently claimed as his own. By the end, Marcus's lawyers looked defeated, already calculating settlement offers. But Nathan wasn't interested in settlements. This was going to trial, public trial, with media coverage and a public record that would permanently establish Victoria Chen as Pathfinder's inventor. February 10th, the civil lawsuit was filed in King County Superior Court. Chen v. Blake, case number 25 CV04281. Intellectual property theft, fraud, unjust enrichment. Damages sought $8.5 million plus punitive damages. The Seattle Times ran the story on page 1. TechCrunch made it their lead. Bloomberg sent reporters. Suddenly, Victoria's private war became public spectacle. Marcus's response came through his lawyers within 48 hours. A motion to dismiss claiming Victoria had signed away all IP rights in the divorce settlement, that this was a bitter ex-wife trying to profit from her former husband's success, that the claims were baseless and malicious. The motion was denied within a week. Judge Marianne Okafor, black woman, late 50s, former patent attorney with zero tolerance for fraud, read the evidence and scheduled trial for March 15th. Fast-tracked because the technology sector moved quickly, and justice delayed was justice denied. Marcus called Victoria's phone 17 times the day the trial date was set. She didn't answer. He left voicemails ranging from apologetic to threatening to desperate. "Tori, please, we can work this out. I'll give you money, equity, whatever you want. Just drop the lawsuit. Think about Emma. Think about what this is doing to our family." Delete. "You're destroying me out of spite. You know I built that company. You helped, sure, but I'm the visionary. I'm the one who made it happen. You're trying to steal credit for my work." Delete. "Fine. If you want war, I'll give you war. I have lawyers too. I'll fight for full custody of Emma. I'll prove you're an unfit mother. I'll make sure you regret this." That one Victoria forwarded to Nathan. Evidence of harassment. Evidence of using their daughter as a weapon. Evidence that Marcus Blake would destroy anyone who threatened his carefully constructed mythology. The civil trial began March 15th in a packed courtroom. Journalists filled the gallery. Tech executives from Amazon, Microsoft, Google attended as observers. Blake Logistics board members sat behind Marcus, expressions grim, and in the back row, barely visible, Emma Blake, age 8, sitting with Marcus's mother. Victoria had fought against her daughter attending. Marcus's lawyers had insisted, "Let the judge see the family." Victoria had lost that fight. Judge Okafor entered, imposing in her robes, expression neutral, but eyes sharp. She'd seen every variety of IP dispute over 30 years on the bench. This one wasn't unique in its mechanics, but the brazenness was notable. Nathan Pierce delivered opening arguments with prosecutorial precision. "Your Honor, this case is simple. Victoria Chen created revolutionary technology called Pathfinder. She gave her husband permission to use it, believing they were partners building something together. Marcus Blake then systematically erased her from the story, filed patents under his name alone, and raised $47 million by lying to investors about who actually invented the technology. This is theft, clear, calculated, and completely provable. Yet Marcus's attorney, Gerald Preston, 60s, silver-haired corporate shark from a white shoe firm, charging $850 per hour countered with the expected narrative. Your Honor, what we have is a bitter ex-wife seeking to profit from her former husband's success. Yes, Miss Chen did coding work early in Blake Logistics development, so did many contractors and consultants. That doesn't make her the inventor. Mr. Blake is the visionary who spent 7 years building a company, securing funding, creating jobs. He's the CEO who turned a concept into a $65 million enterprise. This lawsuit is about jealousy, pure and simple. The battle began. Nathan called Victoria to the stand. She walked forward, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth. She'd practiced this testimony for weeks, but nothing fully prepared her for sitting in a witness box with hundreds of eyes watching, her daughters included. Nathan started gently. Miss Chen, describe your educational background. Bachelor's and master's in computer science from the University of Washington. Graduated summa cum laude. Worked at Microsoft for 4 years as a senior software engineer before leaving to raise my daughter. What was your role in creating Pathfinder? Victoria took a breath. I wrote it. The core algorithm, the machine learning integration, the real-time optimization protocols. Marcus came to me with a business problem, inefficient delivery routes. I solved it with code. Nathan pulled up exhibits on screens throughout the courtroom. Development logs, commit histories, timestamps stretching back 7 years. These logs show 10,847 commits over 7 years from user VCHEN_codes. Is that you? Yes. How many commits show Marcus Blake as the author? 43. Most are minor edits or configuration changes. None are core algorithmic functions. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Reporters typed frantically. Judge Okafor leaned forward, slightly interested. Nathan continued, Did you ever sign documents transferring ownership of Pathfinder to Blake Logistics? No. Marcus told me we were building it together, that it was our company. I believed him. Did you receive compensation beyond your role as his spouse? No. He said helping him was helping our family. I trusted that. Gerald Preston's cross-examination came like a scalpel looking for soft tissue. Miss Chen, you claim you wrote Pathfinder while being a stay-at-home mother, but you were caring for an infant, correct, changing diapers, feeding the exhausting work of motherhood. And yet you expect us to believe you simultaneously created sophisticated AI systems. Victoria's voice stayed level. I coded during naps after bedtime on weekends. Being a mother didn't erase my technical capabilities. How convenient that you have logs claiming authorship, but digital timestamps can be fabricated. How do we know you didn't create these recently to support your lawsuit? Nathan objected. Speculation and badgering. Judge Okafor sustained. Mr. Preston asked questions based on evidence, not conspiracy theories. Preston shifted angles. Miss Chen, you're currently employed by Reynolds Tech, a direct competitor to Blake Logistics. Isn't it true Reynolds has been aggressively poaching Blake Logistics clients? Reynolds Tech competes legally in the open market. How convenient that you filed this lawsuit right before Blake Logistics' IPO, almost like you're trying to sabotage your ex-husband's success. Victoria's eyes flashed, but her voice remained controlled. I filed this lawsuit because Marcus committed fraud. The timing reflects when I gathered sufficient evidence, not some malicious scheme. I won't let him profit from stolen work simply because the truth is inconvenient for his business plans. So you do want money. I want acknowledgement. The money is secondary to having the truth on public record. Preston smirked. No further questions. Nathan called his second witness, Dr. James Rothstein, forensic code analyst from MIT, expert witness in over 200 IP cases. White-haired, grandfatherly, the kind of credibility that made juries trust him immediately. Dr. Rothstein, you analyzed the Pathfinder codebase. What did you find? Rothstein adjusted his glasses, spoke with academic precision. Clear evidence of a single primary author. Coding style, variable naming conventions, comment structure, and algorithmic approach are consistent across 94% of the codebase. This indicates one person wrote the vast majority. Who is that person? Based on comparison with Miss Chen's verified code samples from her Microsoft employment and her current work at Reynolds Tech, I can state with 97% certainty that Victoria Chen wrote Pathfinder. What about Mr. Blake's contributions? Minimal and superficial. UI tweaks, configuration changes. Zero evidence he wrote core algorithmic functions. In my professional opinion, Marcus Blake lacks the technical capability to have invented this system. The courtroom was silent. That last sentence would make headlines. Expert witness declaring Marcus Blake technically incompetent. Preston's cross-examination focused on attacking Rothstein's fee $40,000 for his analysis, suggesting financial motivation to support Victoria. Rothstein shut it down with icy professionalism. I'm compensated for my time, Mr. Preston. My conclusions are based on objective analysis. I've testified for plaintiffs and defendants. I follow the evidence wherever it leads. In this case, it leads to Victoria Chen as Pathfinder's inventor. Then Nathan dropped his surprise witness. Your Honor, I'd like to call David Park, Chief Financial Officer of Blake Logistics. Marcus's face went white. His attorneys scrambled, whispering frantically. David Park walked to the stand, nervous but determined. Mr. Park, how long have you worked at Blake Logistics? 5 years. In your role as CFO, have you ever witnessed Marcus Blake writing code? David hesitated, glancing at Marcus. Then, no, never. Marcus handles business development. Technical problems go to the engineering team. Before you had that team who fixed bugs. Silence stretched. Then David spoke quietly. Miss Chen. Marcus would email her and she'd send back fixes within hours. We all knew. It was an open secret in the company. The gallery erupted. Judge Okafor's gavel cracked like thunder. Order, Nathan pressed. Did Marcus ever publicly acknowledge Victoria's contributions? No. He told us to keep it quiet. Said investors wouldn't fund a company if they knew the tech came from his wife. Nathan pulled up an email chain on the courtroom screens. From Marcus to Victoria, subject line, urgent system crash. Tori, the whole system is down. Investors touring tomorrow. I need you to fix this now. I don't understand the error logs. Please help. I'm begging you. Victoria's response 3 hours later. Fixed. Problem was in the load balancer. I've rewritten the module. Should be stable now. Marcus's reply. You're a lifesaver. I couldn't do this without you. Nathan looked at Judge Okafor. Your Honor, this is one of 847 similar exchanges. Marcus Blake repeatedly asked Victoria to fix, debug, optimize, and rewrite Pathfinder. Yet he told investors he was the technical genius. That's fraud. Judge Okafor's expression was unreadable, but her next words were pointed. Mr. Blake, do you dispute these emails' authenticity? Marcus stood flustered. Your Honor, I can explain. Sit down. You'll have your chance during defense. Marcus's defense was predictable and weak. He took the stand, claimed he'd designed Pathfinder's architecture even if Victoria had helped with implementation. Claimed he'd made the crucial business decisions that turned code into a company. Claimed this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a vindictive ex-wife. Nathan's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Blake, you claim you designed Pathfinder's architecture. Explain how the route optimization algorithm works. Marcus blinked. It's complex. It uses machine learning to, specifically what type of machine learning, neural networks and pattern recognition. Nathan pulled up a whiteboard. Diagram the algorithm for us. I don't have my notes. You invented it. Surely you can explain your own invention. Marcus stammered, unable to produce anything coherent. Nathan let him twist for 30 seconds of excruciating silence, then delivered the kill shot. Let me help. Pathfinder uses a hybrid approach, genetic algorithms, for initial root generation reinforcement learning for optimization and Bayesian inference for uncertainty handling. Did you write any of those components? I supervised their development. That's not what I asked. Did you personally write the code? Silence. Answer the question, Mr. Blake. No, but I directed. Nathan pulled up Marcus's Amazon purchase history. You ordered Introduction to Machine Learning for Beginners in March 2019, 2 years after Pathfinder was already using advanced ML techniques. How did you invent something you didn't understand? Marcus's face turned red. Victoria handled technical implementation, but the ideas were mine. Nathan showed a research paper on the screen. Real-time vehicle routing using dynamic programming. By Victoria L. Chen, published 2016 in the Journal of Operations Research. This describes the exact approach Pathfinder uses. Victoria wrote this in graduate school. Did you contribute to this research? No, but no further questions. Judge Okafor recessed for lunch. When court reconvened 3 hours later, her ruling was swift and absolute. I've heard enough. This is one of the clearest cases of intellectual property theft I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Findings of fact: Victoria Chen is the primary author of Pathfinder. Marcus Blake knowingly misrepresented the technology's origins to investors. The patents listing Blake as sole inventor are fraudulent. Ruling patents are hereby reassigned to Victoria L. Chen. Blake Logistics must pay $8.5 million in damages for unjust enrichment. Marcus Blake is personally liable for fraud. A corrective statement must be issued to all investors. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Case closed. The gavel fell. Final. Irrevocable. Victoria sat stunned as the courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for exits to file stories. Thomas Reynolds squeezed her shoulder. Nathan Pierce allowed himself a small smile of professional satisfaction. Across the aisle, Marcus sat, frozen world crumbling around him. Then the courtroom doors opened. FBI agent Sarah Delgado and SEC investigator Robert Chen walked in with 4 federal agents in tow. Marcus Blake, you're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They handcuffed him, right there in front of everyone. Camera flashes exploded. Marcus's attorneys were shouting. Bailiffs tried controlling the chaos. Victoria turned to look at Emma in the back row. Her daughter's face was pale, confused, terrified. Victoria moved toward her, but Marcus's mother already had Emma rushing her out a side door away from the cameras and chaos. Nathan grabbed Victoria's arm. We need to get you out of here. Back exit. Now. They escaped through the judge's chambers, avoiding the media circus erupting in the courthouse lobby. By the time Victoria reached Nathan's car in the underground parking garage, her phone was exploding with notifications. The arrest was already trending on Twitter. News helicopters circled the courthouse. She sat in the passenger seat, shaking as Nathan drove toward Reynolds Tech headquarters. Is Emma going to be okay? Her voice sounded distant, unfamiliar. Kids are resilient, and you made the right choice. Emma needed to see that actions have consequences, that lying has costs. You didn't do this to her, Victoria. Marcus did. She knew Nathan was right, but watching her daughter's face as federal agents handcuffed her father would haunt Victoria for the rest of her life. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then instinct made her pick up. Victoria Chen. Miss Chen, this is Daniel Foster. We met at Emma's school fair a few months ago. I'm the carpenter. I just saw the news and wanted to make sure you're okay. Victoria's brain struggled to place the name. Then memory clicked. The spring fair back in October. The booth with wooden toys. Kind eyes. Calloused hands. The widower with the 6-year-old son. Mr. Foster, I remember. Her voice cracked. I'm not sure I'm okay. That's honest. Listen, I know this is probably terrible timing, but my son Leo has been asking about Emma. They became friends at the fair and he's worried about her. Would it be okay if I brought dinner over tonight? Nothing fancy, just lasagna and company. Sometimes the hardest days are better with friends. Victoria almost said no, almost protected herself from kindness when she felt too fragile to accept it. Then she thought about Emma alone in her room, trying to process why Daddy was on the news in handcuffs. Yes, please. That would be really kind. 6 o'clock, I'll bring garlic bread too. Thank you, Daniel. You're not alone in this, Victoria. Remember that. The call ended. Victoria leaned her head against the car window as Nathan drove through Seattle traffic past the courthouse where her truth had finally been spoken aloud toward a future she'd fought for but didn't yet know how to inhabit. She'd won. The patents were hers. The money was coming. Marcus was arrested. Justice had been served exactly as she'd planned. So why did victory taste like ashes and regret and the terrified expression on her daughter's face? Daniel Foster arrived at 6 o'clock exactly carrying a glass casserole dish wrapped in towels and his son Leo trailing behind with a paper bag of garlic bread. Victoria opened the door to her Queen Anne apartment, eyes still red from crying she'd done in the bathroom after Emma had locked herself in her room and refused to talk. Daniel didn't comment on her appearance. He just smiled gently and stepped inside. "Leo, you remember Miss Chen from the school fair?" The boy nodded shyly. 6 years old, his father's dark eyes but lighter hair, the cautious demeanor of a child who'd learned too young that the world could take people away. "Is Emma here? I brought her a puzzle we started building last time." Victoria's throat tightened. "She's in her room. She's having a hard day. Maybe give her a few minutes." They set up dinner in the tiny kitchenette, Daniel moving with the easy competence of someone who'd been cooking for himself and his son for years. He didn't ask about the trial, didn't mention the news coverage that had Seattle's tech scene exploding with commentary. He just heated lasagna, sliced bread, and set the IKEA table with mismatched plates like this was normal, like Victoria's life hadn't detonated on live television 6 hours ago. Emma emerged when she smelled food, eyes swollen, face blotchy. She saw Leo and something in her expression softened slightly. "Hey, Leo." "Hi, Emma. I brought the castle puzzle. Want to work on it after dinner?" Emma nodded mutely and sat down. They ate in near silence, the kind that felt protective rather than awkward. Daniel asked Leo about school. Leo talked about his science project on planets Emma picked at her lasagna and occasionally glanced at her mother with questions she wasn't ready to ask. After dinner, the kids sprawled on the living room floor with the wooden puzzle while Victoria and Daniel cleaned dishes in the kitchenette. Their arms brushed in the tight space. Daniel washed Victoria dried. Domestic and simple and exactly what she needed. "You don't have to be okay right now," Daniel said quietly. "Today was brutal. Give yourself permission to not be strong for a while." Victoria's hands stilled on the dish towel. Emma saw them arrest her father. She watched federal agents put him in handcuffs. What kind of mother puts her daughter through that? The kind who teaches her daughter that truth matters more than comfort, that actions have consequences, that women don't stay silent when they've been wronged. Daniel rinsed a plate, set it in the drying rack. "Emma will understand eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but she'll understand that you fought for what was right." "What if she hates me?" "She won't, because you're still here, still showing up, still being her mother even when it's hard. That's what kids need, parents who stay." His voice carried weight on that last word. Victoria remembered what he'd told her months ago at the school fair. His wife Sarah had died of ovarian cancer 3 years prior. He'd been raising Leo alone ever since learning to be both parents in one imperfect package. "How do you do it, single parenting?" Daniel smiled, tired but genuine. "Badly, mostly. But I show up. Some days that's all I've got, and somehow it's enough. Leo knows I love him. He knows I'll always be there. The rest we figure out as we go." They finished the dishes. In the living room, Emma and Leo had completed the castle puzzle and moved on to building with wooden blocks Daniel had brought in his truck. The kids' laughter was tentative but real, a fragile return to normalcy. Victoria walked Daniel and Leo to the door at 8:30. Leo hugged Emma goodbye, promised to bring more puzzles next time. Daniel paused in the doorway, meeting Victoria's eyes. "This is going to sound forward, but I'm going to say it anyway. You're the strongest person I've met in a long time. Not because you won today, because you're still standing after everything you've lost. That's real strength." Victoria felt tears threatening again. "I don't feel strong." Strength isn't about feeling powerful. It's about doing what needs doing even when you're terrified. You've been doing that for months. He hesitated, then reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. If you need anything, someone to watch Emma, someone to just sit with you while you fall apart, someone to remind you that you're not alone. Call me, I mean it. Why are you being so kind to me? You barely know me. Daniel's expression turned serious. Because Sarah died while I was working 60-hour weeks building a business, and I didn't see the signs until it was too late. I learned the hard way that success doesn't mean anything if you lose the people who matter. You're in the middle of a war, Victoria. Everyone needs someone in their corner who isn't there for strategy or victory, just someone who cares whether you survive it. He left before she could respond, Leo waving from the truck as they pulled away. Victoria closed the door and turned to find Emma watching her from the couch. Is Danny nice? Victoria sat down beside her daughter. Very nice. He lost his wife. Leo told me. I know. Emma leaned against Victoria's shoulder, small and warm and frightened. Are you going to leave too? Like Daddy did? Victoria wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding tight. Never. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. Why did they take Daddy away? This was the question Victoria had been dreading. She chose her words carefully, treating Emma like the intelligent human she was rather than a child who needed sugarcoating. Daddy did some things that were wrong. He lied to people about who created the technology his company uses. He broke laws about money and taxes. When adults break laws, there are consequences. The police arrested him because he has to face those consequences. Did you make them arrest him? No. I told the truth about who built Pathfinder. The police investigated and found other things Daddy had done wrong. But Emma, this is important. Daddy did this to himself. Not me, not you. He made choices that had consequences. Does Daddy hate us now? Victoria's heart shattered. Daddy loves you very much. He's confused and angry and scared right now. But none of this changes how much he loves you. This is between me and him. You're still his daughter. That never changes. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then, Grammy says you're being mean to Daddy. She says you're trying to destroy him because you're jealous. Victoria took a breath, fighting the urge to defend herself against Marcus's mother's poison. Grammy is upset because her son is in trouble. Sometimes when people we love mess up, we want to blame someone else. I'm an easy target. But Emmy, I need you to know something. I didn't do this to hurt Daddy. I did it because he stole 7 years of my work and pretended I didn't exist. I did it so you would grow up knowing your mom is smart and capable and refuses to be erased. Does that make sense? Emma nodded slowly. Mrs. Patterson says women in science used to get their discoveries stolen by men all the time, like Rosalind Franklin and DNA. Exactly like that. So you're like Rosalind Franklin. I'm trying to make sure what happened to her doesn't keep happening to other women. Emma hugged her mother tighter. I think you're brave, Mom, even if Grammy doesn't. Victoria kissed the top of her daughter's head, overwhelmed by love and grief and the terrible responsibility of raising a child through warfare. Thank you, baby. Now let's get you to bed. Tomorrow's a school day. The next 3 weeks blurred together. Marcus's arraignment, where federal prosecutors laid out charges that could result in 25 years in prison. Bail set at $5 million, which Marcus couldn't make because his assets were frozen pending investigation. He remained in custody at the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac. Blake Logistics Board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Marcus as CEO, suspend all equity, and begin liquidation proceedings. David Park was installed as interim CEO with instructions to cooperate fully with federal investigators. Reynolds Tech offered employment to all 63 Blake Logistics employees. 59 accepted. The 4 who declined were executives who'd known about Marcus's fraud and chosen silence over integrity. Victoria spent her days at Reynolds Tech developing Pathfinder 3.0 and fielding media requests. Everyone wanted her story. She declined most interviews, gave careful statements to a select few. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be acknowledged and then left alone to do her work. Her evenings belonged to Emma, and increasingly to Daniel Foster. He'd call every few days, ask if they needed anything, sometimes brought dinner, or took both kids to the park, while Victoria dealt with lawyers. Nothing romantic, nothing demanding, just quiet presence that felt like safety after months of warfare. One Saturday in early April, Daniel showed up with materials to build Emma the treehouse she'd been wanting. He spent the day in Victoria's tiny backyard, barely more than a concrete pad with a single tree, constructing a platform with Leo and Emma helping. Victoria watched from the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in her hands. Daniel worked with his hands the way she worked with code, total focus, precision, building something meant to last. He showed the kids how to measure twice and cut once, how to check if something was level, how to trust their work enough to climb on it when finished. By evening, a small platform nestled in the tree's branches, complete with a rope ladder and a roof to keep rain off. Emma was ecstatic, already planning sleepovers and secret clubs. Leo was beaming with pride over the work they'd accomplished together. Daniel came inside, covered in sawdust, accepted the beer Victoria offered and collapsed onto her couch with the satisfied exhaustion of physical labor completed. "You didn't have to do that. I know. But Emma deserves something good right now, something that's hers that nobody can take away or claim credit for." A treehouse seemed right. Victoria sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Always." "Why are you really doing this, dinners, treehouses, checking in on us? You barely know me." Daniel was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. "When Sarah got sick, people disappeared. Friends we thought we had just vanished because they didn't know how to handle death coming for someone so young. I learned who actually cared and who just liked the idea of us as a couple. After she died, I was alone with Leo and grief and no idea how to survive. A few people showed up anyway, brought meals, sat with me while I cried, helped me remember I was still human." He met Victoria's eyes. "You're going through something brutal, different from what I experienced, but brutal in its own way. And you're doing it alone except for an 8-year-old who needs you to be strong. I'm showing up because I know what it's like to need someone who doesn't want anything from you except to make sure you survive. That's all this is. Someone caring whether you're okay." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she'd forgotten was possible. "What if I want it to be more than that?" Daniel's expression went very still. "Victoria, you're in the middle of a divorce. Your ex-husband is facing federal charges. You're fighting one of the biggest IP theft cases in tech history. You don't need romantic complications right now. Maybe I need something good, something that isn't war or strategy or survival. Maybe I need someone who sees me as a person, not a victim or a victor or a cautionary tale." "I do see you as a person. That's why I'm saying we should wait. Let the dust settle. Let you figure out who you are without Marcus, without the trial, without the chaos. Then if you still want this, I'll be here. But I won't be the rebound you regret when you're thinking clearly." Victoria knew he was right. Knew jumping into something new while her marriage was still legally dissolving, and Marcus was in federal custody, was objectively terrible timing. But God, she was tired of doing the right thing, tired of being strategic, tired of thinking 3 steps ahead. "What if I'm tired of being careful?" Daniel smiled, sad and understanding. "Then I'll be the careful one for both of us. Because you deserve better than a relationship that starts in the wreckage of your old one. You deserve someone who gets you at your best, not just at your most desperate." He finished his beer, stood up, called for Leo. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, when this is over, when Marcus is sentenced and the appeals are done and Emma's had time to process, I'm asking you on a real date. Dinner conversation, the whole thing. But not yet. Not while you're still bleeding from the war." "Okay." Victoria nodded, throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. "Okay. Good. See you next weekend. I promised Emma I'd teach her to use a hand plane." He left. Victoria stood in the doorway watching his truck disappear down the street, feeling something that might have been hope or might have been loneliness or might have been the first stirrings of something she'd stopped believing she deserved. Marcus's trial date was set for May 23rd. Federal prosecutors offered a plea deal, pled guilty to securities fraud and tax evasion, agreed to full restitution, except 8 years in federal prison. Marcus refused, insisted on taking it to trial, convinced a jury would see Victoria as a vindictive ex-wife and him as a victim of her manipulation. His attorneys advised against it. Nathan Pierce warned Victoria the trial would be ugly, that Marcus would try to destroy her credibility, that Emma would be subpoenaed to testify about their family life. Victoria steeled herself for more warfare. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Prosecutors presented the evidence Nathan had helped gather: forged signatures, offshore accounts, investor presentations containing lies Marcus had told under oath. David Park testified, visibly shaking about the culture of deception Marcus had created. 3 engineers testified that Marcus couldn't code, that he'd repeatedly claimed credit for work others had done. Victoria testified again, walking the jury through 7 years of stolen work. She brought development logs, email chains, commit histories. She explained in clear technical language how Pathfinder worked and why Marcus's explanations in investor pitches were gibberish that proved he didn't understand his own supposed invention. Marcus's defense was predictable. His attorneys portrayed him as a visionary CEO who'd relied on talented people, including his wife, to execute his vision. They claimed Victoria was exaggerating her contributions, that marriage was a partnership where both people contributed to shared success, that she was only pursuing this because the divorce had made her bitter. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. Marcus Blake, convicted felon. Sentencing was scheduled for June 15th. Federal guidelines suggested 20 to 25 years. Victoria requested to speak at the hearing to advocate for measured justice rather than maximum punishment. Nathan warned her it might not matter. The judge would consider many factors beyond her wishes. Emma asked to write a letter to the judge. Victoria helped her draft something honest and heartbreaking about loving Daddy, but understanding he'd done wrong things, about wanting him to have consequences, but also wanting him to have the chance to be better. The letter was 2 pages of 8-year-old handwriting and wisdom far beyond her years. The sentencing hearing was packed. Media tech executives, victims of Marcus's fraud, people who'd worked for him, and people who'd competed against him. Victoria sat in the front row with Thomas Reynolds on one side and Daniel Foster on the other. Emma was with Daniel's parents, spared this final public devastation. Federal Judge Richard Morrison presided, a black man in his late 60s, with the gravitas of someone who'd seen every variety of human failure and still believed in redemption's possibility. He'd reviewed all the evidence, read Emma's letters, studied the presentencing reports. Marcus stood when called, looking gaunt after weeks in federal custody. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by standard detention center clothing. He'd lost weight, aged years in months. Judge Morrison spoke first. "Mr. Blake, you stole intellectual property, lied to investors, evaded taxes, and forged documents. These are serious federal crimes that undermine the integrity of our financial system and the tech industry. You've shown remarkable arrogance throughout this process, refusing plea deals, insisting on trial, wasting court resources." Marcus's attorneys looked grim. This preamble suggested maximum sentencing was coming. "However," Judge Morrison continued, "I've also read a letter from your 8-year-old daughter asking me to give you the chance to become the father she deserves. I've heard testimony from Victoria Chen asking for accountability with compassion rather than vengeance. These voices matter." He paused, letting the courtroom settle. "Here is my sentence. Count 1 securities fraud, 8 years in federal prison. Count 2 wire fraud, 6 years concurrent. Count 3 tax evasion, 3 years concurrent. Total 8 years in FCI Sheridan minimum security facility, followed by 5 years supervised release. Restitution of $8.5 million to victims. Fines of $500,000 to the U.S. Treasury. Community service 2,000 hours upon release. You will be eligible for early release after 5 years with good behavior. Mr. Blake, you destroyed lives. You stole dreams. You betrayed trust. 8 years is not revenge. It's accountability. Use that time to become the man your daughter deserves. Court adjourned. The gavel fell. Federal marshals led Marcus away. He looked back once at Victoria, eyes filled with something that might have been regret or might have been hatred. She'd never know which. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Victoria gave a brief statement that Nathan had helped her draft. Justice was served today. Marcus Blake will face consequences for his crimes, but I also want to acknowledge that accountability doesn't require cruelty. Emma deserves a father who learns from his mistakes. 8 years gives him that chance. That's all I have to say. She walked away from the cameras, Daniel's hand briefly touching her lower back in support, Thomas clearing a path through the crowd. They escaped to Nathan's car, drove back to Reynolds Tech in silence. Victoria's phone buzzed. Email from the Invisible Innovators Foundation she'd established with part of her settlement money. Subject Case 100. They'd just helped their 100th woman recover stolen intellectual property. 100 lives changed. 100 voices restored. The foundation she'd built from her pain was creating justice for others who'd been erased. She forwarded the email to Thomas with a note. "This is what matters, not Marcus's sentencing. This." Thomas replied immediately. "You're changing the world, Victoria. One case at a time. Proud of you." 5 years later, Victoria stood in her new house in Ballard, a renovated craftsman with a real backyard, 3 bedrooms, and a workshop where Daniel kept his woodworking tools. The treehouse he'd built in her Queen Anne apartment's single tree had been rebuilt here, larger and more elaborate, shared by Emma and Leo, who'd become inseparable. The wedding was small. Immediate family, close friends, Thomas Reynolds giving Victoria away because her own father had passed 2 years prior. Emma stood as junior bridesmaid, 13 years old, and already coding apps that venture capitalists were interested in funding. Leo was Daniel's best man, 9 years old and proud. They'd waited, exactly as Daniel had insisted. Waited until Marcus was sentenced, until the appeals were exhausted, until Emma had processed her father's imprisonment enough to accept that her mother deserved happiness. Waited until Victoria knew who she was, without war defining her. The ceremony was in their backyard, beneath the trees Daniel had planted, surrounded by the garden they'd built together. Simple vows, honest promises. 2 people who'd survived loss and warfare, finding something quiet and real in the aftermath. At the reception, Thomas Reynolds stood to give a toast. 12 years ago, Victoria saved my son without asking for anything in return. Since then, I've watched her save herself, save her daughter, and save hundreds of other women from the erasure she experienced. Victoria, you've taught me that strength isn't about power. It's about showing up when it matters. Thank you for showing up, for being brave, for refusing to stay invisible. To Victoria and Daniel, may you build something that lasts. They drank. They danced. Emma and Leo stole cake from the kitchen. Michael Reynolds, now 27, and Reynolds Tech's CTO, talked excitedly with Emma about her app development work, treating her like a colleague despite the age gap. Later, after most guests had left, Victoria stood in the backyard watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky impossible colors. Daniel joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You okay?" "Better than okay. Happy. Is that allowed?" "Definitely allowed. You've earned it." "I got an email from Marcus last week. From prison. First time he's written in 3 years." Daniel tensed slightly. "What did it say?" Victoria pulled out her phone, found the message, read aloud. "Dear Tori, I've been taking college courses in prison, learning to actually code, not just take credit. It's humbling. It's hard. I fail a lot. My therapist says I'm a narcissist. I'm learning what that means. I'm learning how it hurt people. I write Emma every week. Thank you for not keeping her from me. Thank you for asking the judge for mercy I didn't deserve. I'm using this time to become better. I don't know who I'll be when I get out, but I hope I'll be someone Emma can respect, someone you don't have to fear. I'm sorry, Tori, for everything. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke, but I mean it. Marcus." Daniel was quiet. Then, "Do you believe him?" "I don't know. But I believe in the possibility that people can change. That's enough." "Are you going to write back?" "Eventually. Not yet, but eventually." Victoria leaned into Daniel's warmth. "Emma asked if she could visit him next year, when he's eligible for family visits. I told her we'd talk about it." "What do you think?" "I think Emma deserves to know her father. Not the one who lied and stole, but the one who's trying to be better. If he's genuine, she should see that. If he's not, she's old enough to recognize it." They stood in silence, watching their children play in the treehouse Daniel had built in the yard of the home they'd created together. Victoria thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, invisible, erased, desperate. That woman felt like a stranger now. She'd reclaimed her name, her work, her voice. She'd built a foundation that had helped 847 people recover stolen intellectual property. She'd raised a daughter who coded fearlessly and advocated loudly and refused to be invisible. She'd found partnership with someone who valued her brilliance instead of stealing it. She'd won, not just the legal battles, the war for her own identity. Daniel kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about? How silence isn't strength, it's surrender. How I almost surrendered to Marcus's narrative and disappeared forever. How refusing to be erased changed everything." "You changed everything," Daniel corrected gently. "For yourself. For Emma. For hundreds of women who watched you fight and found their own courage," Emma called from the treehouse. "Mom, Danny, come look at the stars. Leo says he can see Mars." They climbed the ladder together. Victoria in her wedding dress, Daniel in his suit, joining their children in the space he'd built with his hands. Above them, Seattle's sky spread vast and dark stars emerging as the city's lights faded. Possibilities stretching infinite. Victoria had spent 10 years invisible, 5 years at war. Now, finally, she was simply visible, present, acknowledged, whole. And that she thought, while her daughter pointed out constellations and her husband's hand found hers in the darkness, was more valuable than any empire built on stolen code. Truth had won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but completely. And in the end, being seen for who she actually was mattered more than any credit stolen or any victory claimed by someone else's voice. She was Victoria Chen, inventor, mother, fighter, builder of systems and futures and foundations that couldn't be erased, and she was done being quiet.